and there's plenty to do. And the deadline is the 28th of January. And I don't know if you remember, but we started on the 29th of December, 29th of November. So we're just over halfway through the time that we have for assignment 2. So you might have to bear that in mind as we go through it. We should be most of you should be about halfway through. If you're keeping up to date and you're on time and you're on task, you should be about halfway through assignment 2. What was assignment 2? Does anyone remember? It's been a while. But I mean, that's the summary. That's right. You've got a project, you've got an idea, you've got something that you're trying to achieve. Yeah. You basically need to, prepare, plan, and document a project. We looked at the first, assignment 1 was all about the theory of how to manage a project. And in assignment 2, we've been talking about how to actually apply that. So you have an idea for a project, and you're coming up with basically steps to take it from the idea to something that earns you cash. And we're hoping to sort of join the dots in between. That's basically what's going on. You've all got an idea for a project that you're working on, and you want to take it from the idea stage to the income stage. And there's a number of different elements in this. The main thing that I suppose I'll get to later, basically today we're going to be looking at the team. We've done a bit of this already with Tori, talking about building profiles and stuff, and we'll touch on that briefly, but there's other bits that sort of map into that. So that's where we're up to. The team is the bit that we're up to, but where are we so far? I mean, ideally, by this point, you should definitely have a project brief. You should definitely have a pretty clear idea of what it is, of what your project is, what it is you're trying to build. What's your idea? You should be able to explain it quite quickly and simply to anyone who asks, with the aid of your project brief. Has everyone got their project brief handy and on the screen? In fact, I might just, so keep all of that in mind as we discuss all the extra bits, and we can start fleshing that out even more and turn it from a dream into a plan. They say that a goal is a dream with a plan. So you got the dream, we're working on the plan, and then this should end up being a goal of yours. Something that you'll go through your plan, and by the end of it, you'll have a massive income stream. This time next year, we'll be millionaires. So yeah, so this is what you've got so far. You should all have something that's very similar to this. Probably started with this, and then when you started filling in your features in more detail and your screen designs in more detail, you kind of accidentally ended up doing stuff which would meet the criteria. So these are the criteria that you're sort of aiming at, that we're aiming at the moment. So investigation is a big thing. Talking to users, the people who are likely to be using your system, but also maybe doing questionnaires, but also doing documentary research, finding other companies who have a similar product, how much are they charging, and what are the features of their product and how will yours be different, different ways of marketing, possibly doing lots of research, looking at magazine articles, reviews of different products that are maybe quite similar. And yeah, lots of and more. I mean, if you're building a system that's going to plug into Facebook or plug into another existing system, then maybe some research, some investigation into the different APIs, some technical investigation. So yeah, but some investigation, some evidence of some investigation. You should also have, and from your investigation, you can't help but analyze the results of your investigation as you go. So as you draw conclusions from your investigation, be making notes on it. And we'll come to a bit more detail about that in a moment. And document. Basically, do some investigation and some analysis, document it, and use it to build your requirements. That's where we were before Christmas, before the break. And what I asked before Christmas was that you would all have most of this done, or ideally in a shape that looks vaguely finished by now. So hopefully most of you have made a lot of progress towards having all this, or ideally actually have all this done. And this would basically involve, so investigations, interviews, articles, questionnaires, quotes maybe from companies, from suppliers, maybe some research on e-learns, some reviews, some books maybe, some theory, Basically, just the research that you need to do, evidence of having done some research into this thing that you're going to try and build. Why do you think it's going to work? So you need to, well, you should have some of these things already, at least maybe 2 or 3 of these things done. You might be intending to add more later, and that's fine. But staying up, rather than doing this perfectly now and getting further behind on everything else, you might like to sort of draw a sort of metaphorical line under some of this, because you can come back to it later. Inevitably, things change as the projects develop, especially at this early stage. Whilst you're, I mean, even if this was a real project, you'd still just be in the planning phase. I mean, I'm doing a project along at the same time. I'm leading the project to deliver a new, improved VLE system. And we haven't started building it yet. I've only got as far as this. I've spoken to a few people about it, but there's still quite a lot more research and investigation I need to do. I need to talk to the suppliers, the people who are going to be hosting the website and things. So yeah, the research and analysing the results of the research is a useful way to think of it. So yeah, as you're doing your analysis, you might have like alternative solutions. Do you want to host it internally or externally? Do you want to have your own server, or do you want to pay someone else to host it? If you're building an app, is it going to be Android or iOS or Windows or Symbian? So yeah, there's sort of alternatives, compatibility issues, feasibility. How much money are you likely to make? Remember, we looked at different ways of looking at return on investment, cost-benefit analysis. Some of those things would be good. Again, you might not have done them yet. It's useful to think about, as you're going through this, if you're thinking, what else do I need to do? Go back and have a look at what you did for assignment 1. Because for assignment 1, you wrote about what an investigation is and what an analysis is. So if you're looking at analysis and thinking, what on earth was that? Go back and look at your assignment 1, and it will remind you what the things that you could include under here. So this is a bit of a summary, but yeah, you've written about all these things in detail already. Inputs, outputs, process, and storage. I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. By this point, you're starting to think in a little bit more detail about your physical system. What information does it need to take in? What information is the user going to be giving to your system? What information is it going to be displaying? What's it actually going to do? And that is what the requirement spec is all about. As anyone, I'm going through this quite quickly. We have done it before, but if you have any questions or points, please hurl them at me as we go. I'm going to recap and get up to where we are before I start talking about the team, because it has been 3 weeks since we were last here. So the requirement spec is basically is a big, very important part of any project. What exactly is it? What are the requirements? What is the thing that you're building? What does it need to do? That's what the requirements are. The requirement specification is basically you are being specific about what your system is required to do. That's what the requirements spec is. It's specifying what your system needs to do in order to be considered a success. Does that make sense? So your requirement spec is just a list of the things that your system needs to meet. A big part of that is, of course, the functions, the purpose. What is it? Like the general overview of your program. I mean, a useful example as we go through this. So I'm going to use the example of a website that sells car parts. So someone's asked you to lead a project to build a website that sells car parts. So okay, fine. So the purpose is to possibly sell car parts that are reasonably priced and a secure system. And then suddenly you start talking about the function. So people need to be able to place orders, and they need to have a nice database of cars. Is it just going to be cars, or is it going to be trucks and bikes as well? And then where are you going to get the pieces from? Are you going to use original manufacturer pieces or sort of dodgy Chinese imports? Where are you going to get them from? Who are you going to sell them to? Who are you going to use for shipping? All of these things, it was just a random example, but you can see suddenly we've got a lot of detail, and this should all be captured in your requirement specification. Yeah, and on top, so as well as the purpose and the functions, you also need to know how much time you've got. Like, when do you need it to be built by? Set a deadline. possibly multiple deadlines. I like to set at least two. One for when you have the test system in place, and one when you have the final system in place. But that's just me. I mean, and that's possibly getting into more detail about project planning. But you need to say at least when you're going to deliver the system and how much it's going to cost. I mean, these are sort of arbitrary. You can pick these out of the air, decide on the spot, but you have them in your requirements spec because, you know, it's on the criteria. Yeah, and list your inputs and outputs. I mean, like I was saying earlier, if it's a car parts website, I'm going to need to know my customers. My inputs are going to be things like customer name, customer credit card details, customer shipping address, and whilst I'm capturing these details, I might as well capture their age, their gender. I could also capture their nationality. I could capture what car they have, what cars they want in the future, maybe what magazines they read or any other information. Will they allow me to sell these details to other people? Nice little tick box in there just in case they forget it and make the font like 0.1 size or something. Yeah, so these will be the inputs. The outputs will be, well, the outputs of the system will be instructions to the warehouse to send this part to someone. That's going to be the main output. But also, I mean, if the input is their credit card details, I suppose the output would be instructions to the bank to transfer from one account to another. Other outputs would be a receipt printed on the screen and an email sent to the customer. Yeah? So these would be the inputs and the outputs of the system. The storage requirements, well, there's going to be a lot of that detail is going to be stored. You're going to want to keep your customer details, probably not their credit card details. I don't think you're allowed to do that. But you'll want to store a fair amount of information about that transaction. Hmm. Yes, good question. So if this was a game that we're talking about, the inputs would be assuming the program's installed or everything else that you do with it. So the a menu system. So I suppose the output would be a menu system, but then the input would be selections from a menu system. And then if you're actually playing the game, then it's going to be, I don't know, jump, shoot, reverse, pause, difficulties, and then, yeah, but then also within the menu system, you're going to have difficulty settings, possibly character customization inputs. And the output will then be, you know, character going boing on the screen, or rocket coming out of character, enemy death, and stuff. And the processes will be everything that happens in between you pressing the jump button and the output of the character going boing. Yes, basically the processes sit between the inputs and the outputs. Input, process, output. I should maybe rearrange those slightly. It's not a bad idea, but yeah. Everything that happens between the input and the output, between customer typing in details and clicking purchase, or part being shipped from warehouse, everything that happens in between those two stages is processes. Similarly, everything that happens between like user pressing jump on the keypad and avatar going boing, or that's all processes. And storage is basically how much of that information about the inputs and the outputs gets recorded for you to then reuse later. And storage is kind of obvious to an extent. Inputs and outputs are obvious, but somehow a lot of them are so obvious that you just don't think of them. It takes some time to get used to thinking about, you know, the way that you use a computer. It was a fun thing to do, is to try and define what an input device is. It's very hard to try and define an input device. Of course, it's you, you know, input things into the computer, tell the computer things. Yeah, so it's one of these things which is so obvious that unless you're used to thinking in systems that way, you might struggle. But yeah, list them. List all your inputs, list all your outputs, all your processes, and the stuff you need to store. And this would also still be part of your requirements set. As you're doing that, another useful thing two other useful things are a use case diagram and a process flow diagram. So if I, going back to my car parts selling website, e-commerce site as the example, all I've done so far is talk about the customer. But presumably, I'm going to need an administrator of some kind to, update the car parts database. So if we want to sell, I don't know, up till this point, we haven't dealt with the Vauxhall Astra, but maybe we need to sell Vauxhall Astra parts as well. So put photos on the website, change the text, maybe change the prices and things. So there needs to be an administrator user as well. And as well as customers and administrators, there's going to be people who are not customers. So we need to create then accounts. So the use case diagram, the purpose of a use case diagram is to get you to think about the different people, the different types of people who are going to be using your system. I've got the use case diagram is on a slide, which is that slide. So this is a use case diagram. So unregistered users, site admin, and users of the site. And this is not a car parts warehouse, but you get the gist. So you identify your user, and then each of these bubbles represents a feature, something that user can do. Yeah. Yes. You can have dotted lines with more features coming out. So you can have sub features and super features. Though, yes, yes. But that might be more well. Yeah, that might be more useful later on when you come to actually designing your software in more detail. I wouldn't go too far beyond. Don't drill down into like ludicrous detail. So I don't know, menu system and then options and then sound. And then you can have like mutes and then maybe, I don't know, stereo or mono. Or... Yeah, exactly. You're not designing it yet. You're analyzing it. You're building your requirements. So, yeah, the danger is that you can get a bit carried away. Try not to. This is what we're doing is listing what we need our system to do. We're not designing it yet. But thank you. Yeah, that's good. It's a good way of defining the scope of what it is we're trying to do. Yes. 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 You can put it twice. I mean, it's useful to put it in the analysis because in the analysis you can say where it came from. In the requirements spec, all you're doing is listing it. In the analysis, you can say, having spoken to 20 different users, 10 of them said that they needed this feature, so I'm going to include that on my list of features, and that will mean that we need to have these inputs. So the analysis is I think as I mentioned before Christmas, the investigation, the analysis, and the requirement spec kind of happen at once. Because it's very hard to do some investigation without analyzing the results immediately. And then you have your requirements back, even if you're not keeping track of it. Yeah, it appears in both. Here, you're just listing it. In the analysis, you'll also be saying where it came from. Is that good? The analysis sort of sits between the investigation and the requirements spec. The investigation, if you like, is turning your investigation. The analysis is turning your investigation into something clear. Some clear goals for your system your system needs to meet. Process flow diagrams. Well, this is an example of a process flow diagram. The diagonal ones boxes are decisions, and these are processes. So this helps you explain what a process flow diagram is. It might be try and draw one for your own system, and if you're stuck, then let me know. I'll give you an opportunity to do this in a few minutes. So, has anyone drawn a process flow diagram yet? No. Okay, that might be a fun thing to do later, because I think they are a bit. Unless you've drawn one before, it is a bit. You think, okay, well, it's quite easy, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to do something else and put it off. They are quite easy to do, but I think drawing the first one, yeah, it would be good to do it together. So yeah, use case diagrams and process flow diagrams are great to have in your requirements spec. And KPIs and CSFs, you remember what they are, don't you? Yeah, it's written down in assignment 1 somewhere. Yeah, that's right. Key performance indicators are actually just basically it's sort of a list of well, critical success factors are the things that your system needs to be able to do. KPIs are more quantitative nice to haves. So a critical success factor would be ship car parts. If your website can't, if your system can't send out car parts, then or accept credit card payments, then well, it hasn't succeeded. Key performance indicators will be things like number of people using the website. So obviously you want as many different customers as possible, and the success of the performance of your website will be judged by the number of people who use your website. Or maybe if it's an app, maybe the number of downloads you've got. Or possibly you could also have other key performance indicators like the number of levels or the number of parts you have for sale. But it's better to have them, they can be qualitative, but it's better to be able to put a number to each of your KPIs. Once you've got 3, stop, move on, and then if you think of more, then go back and add them. Minimum of 3. But yeah, don't have to go overboard. And just sort of as many as come to mind at the time, write them down, and then if you've got more than 3, then stop and move on. And then if you think of more later, then go back and add them. Yes, probably 3 for key performance indicators, maybe 6 for critical success factors, because the critical success factors will shape your product a bit more. But you may well have, there's going to be a lot of overlap between the critical success factors and your functions, because the CSFs define what your system is doing. And it's also wise to include a few words on support mechanisms or training mechanisms or maintenance. That's obviously going to be extremely vague and vary from a lot depending on what the system is. For example, if it's a game, your support and training and maintenance will probably be along the lines of a credits page which says this is built by these people. Any comments, suggestions, email me at this address, and that'll probably be it. Whereas if it's a car parts website, selling website, then your support is going to be quite active. You might also then ask each customer for feedback afterwards, send them a questionnaire, and ask them to write reviews on other websites or the parts they've bought. Maybe help buttons. Training can take different forms. You can training doesn't necessarily mean like people coming to a training session. A help button, or just a well laid out website with enter your name here and enter your credit card number here, and the security number is on the back of your credit card here. It's the picture and it's with a red ring around it. When you think of training, just try and think of like things that help people use your system, the non-obvious parts of your system. And maintenance, again, well, will vary enormously. Backing up the website is going to be a big thing, but you're probably not interested in backing up high scores on your game or anything. So these will vary a lot, but just a few words on each. And you can, I'm sure you can all think of a few words on support, a few words on training, and a few words on maintenance. You don't have to write War and Peace, but just sort of acknowledge, just show that you've acknowledged it, show that you recognise that this is where you need to write things about support and training and maintenance. Any questions about this? Hopefully you will have all started this. I know you have because I've seen it. But this is the kind of thing which, try and have like at least 3 for each of these things in red. And then you can probably go back to it later, apart from the time and cost. Have at least 1 time and cost, and then have like maybe 3 for each, at minimum. You can always go back to this later and add more things to it. So that's where we're up to. This is basically the criteria we've been working on so far. Systems investigation, systems analysis, and documentation, and documentation is going to be like the requirements spec and the evidence of this. The reason why I'm talking a lot about the requirements spec now is that when you come to evaluate your solution, evaluate what it is you've built, you're going to be evaluating it against these requirements. What you actually end up building an assignment for is likely to be a cut down version of this, and so you can copy and paste the requirements and delete as appropriate. Obviously in the real world you can't do that, but the time and effort you spend on building requirements now, I mean literally you will be copying and pasting from this for assignment 4, or a lot of you will be copying and pasting from this for assignment 4. So it is worth putting a bit of effort into this now, because it will save you time and effort later. So what I'm going to do today, what we're going to talk about today is the team. We talked a bit about organizational structure last session. I introduced you to OpenProj and Gantt charts and work-based structures and work breakdown structures and product breakdown structures. We've done a lot of that stuff already. So that bit we've already sort of gone over. I'll remind you briefly about that in a moment. Roles and responsibilities, leadership, human resources is something that I'd like to talk about now, today, in a moment or two when we get there. But yeah, roles, leadership, and human resources. And then this last one is just design the project organization with reference to prepared project management plan. So this is basically drawing a link between what you do for these 3 things and your OpenProj file. And then after that, the last 3 things are carrying out control and coordination of a project. So basically put more detail into your OpenProj file. Project scheduling and cost control techniques, again, is a lot of that will happen within OpenProj. And the last one, the last 2, measuring project performance and reporting change control procedures. This is to do with quality control, which we will, I've got a separate PowerPoint on that, which I'll leave that for another time because I don't think it's worth talking about that just yet. I don't think that's necessary. I think we've got enough to think about at the moment. So, but that's the last thing. And once we've done all this, then you've finished assignment 2, and we can all heave a sigh of relief as we move on to assignment 3. But yeah, well, you can relieve a sigh of relief because you'll be halfway through. So that's everything. That's literally everything in the entire assignment. We looked already at organizing, the way to organize a project, the way to think about your project, plan your project, and make sure that you actually are making progress towards the final goal. When you think, I've got ages to do my project. I mean, I'm thinking like, I don't have to have Moodle 2 ready until August. It's ages away, end of August. That's like almost next year. We've only just started, 9 months. Seems like a really long time. But then when you list everything that you need, when I list everything that I need to do between where we are now and having a fully tested, fully functional, fully trained, with everyone fully trained in using our brand new Moodle system, when I list all the things that need to be done between now and then, suddenly 9 months doesn't seem like a very long time at all. So a Gantt charts and proper organization of your project makes it much more likely that your project will be delivered on time. It speaks for itself, keeps you on track, lets everybody know what they're supposed to be doing. Product breakdown structures and work breakdown structures. These will all be, basically most of this will be done by OpenProject. If you put enough detail into your OpenProject file, OpenProject will automatically draw your product breakdown structure and your work breakdown structure. It will automatically do your cost control. Your milestones are already defined. It'll do your critical path analysis, and it does a Gantt chart for you. The only thing it doesn't do is risk analysis. So you might like to write a few words on risk analysis at some point, but everything else, you just do an OpenProj file and it meets all these things. And that is the bulk of all the criteria that talk about organisation of a project. Um, has anyone fiddled with Open Project much over Christmas? Has anyone made any progress on their Gantt chart? No, still on the requirements page. No, that's fine. That's normal. Oh, good. Yeah, no, that will be. I can imagine where that came from. That will have come from LibreOffice. There's OpenOffice and there's LibreOffice, and I could bore you with the origin of the two. I won't, but that's good. I'm glad that that exists. Um, the only thing I'll say about the two is that LibreOffice has more features. OpenOffice is more reliable. I'll leave it at that. I could go on for a while about it. I'm not going to. So the organization of a project, yeah, do an open proj file, and it'll take care of most of this. Just don't forget to do risk analysis as well. Shouldn't have to be lots, just a bit on risk analysis. So this is what I wanted to talk about today, organizing a team. You remember when you were looking at sort of Prince2 resources, one of the principles of Prince2 was defined roles and responsibilities. This is a common theme on any project management structure. Any successful team, people need to know what their roles are. So for a lot of you, I suspect the only person working a project is going to be you. But you're not going to say that in your plan. So what you're going to have to identify who are your customers and who are your suppliers. That should be relatively easy to do. Let me know if you're struggling to define them. It can be quite difficult. For example, on the Moodle 2 thing, the customers are kind of my colleagues. They also work here. They're the teachers and the students. And the suppliers, well, some of them are in the IT department and some of them are external. So it's quite difficult to decide who your customers are, who your suppliers are, who your specialists are, who report to the project manager, and choosing a project executive. The project executive is basically the person who the project manager reports to. Yes. Possibly. You might also like to think of the primary shareholder or the board of directors or one of the chairman or someone. There's usually someone to fund it. Yeah, possibly the bank. The bank might be the project executive. Basically, a project executive usually is just someone who keeps track of what's going on. A good way to think of it is they authorize payments. So you've written your project proposal, you've been given permission to proceed, and then you do your design, you do your research, your analysis, you do your design, and then you're about to start building, and the first thing you need to do is dig a big hole in the ground and fill it with concrete. So you need to go to your project executive and say, right, we're ready. Here's our plans, here's our design, this is what we're going to do, and then the project executive will look at it very carefully and will usually then authorize the release of the cash. Or will say, I'm not paying for this until you sort out this. So that's what the project executive usually does. They do other things as well, but that's mostly their primary role is to just authorize each stage of the project. Could be your dad. Yeah. Yeah, dad is a good example. Dad or wife is often a good one as well. I want to do something. Well, have you done this? No, not yet. Okay, I'll go and do that first. Can I do it now? Yes. Okay. No, possibly not. Yes, it could well be. I mean, yes, it could be anyone who's interested in using that app. Yes, it could be. In which case, you need to find someone who represents your customers, because you're not going to be able to get everyone in the world to fill in a questionnaire. But what you could do is just identify one person who speaks for a certain group. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Whilst you need to define them, um, the definition doesn't have to be uh, rigid. There are some things that customers can do, but they don't have to do. Um, it's just sort of being aware, I suppose. Try and think of each of these, and then try and think if there's anyone who'd fit into that slot. Quite often, I mean, your customer and supplier might end up being the same person, or your project manager. It's usually your project manager or your customer and your project executive might be the same person. Um, so yeah, the one person can fulfill two of these roles if necessary. They're not sort of absolute. They're just use them to help guide your thinking. And it might be, if you can, then it would be good to identify one separate, at least one person who meets each of these. Yes, yes. Um, so, identifying one, at least one, well, try and identify one person who fits in each of these roles. It might be that one person meets many of these roles. Um, Specialist skills. Most of your projects, I would imagine, needs someone with some specialist skills or some special interest or specialist knowledge. So using my car parts warehouse or the car parts website as an example, I'm going to need a number of different specialists at various points during my project. I'm going to need someone who knows about payment processing so that we can get the credit card details and process that. I'm going to need someone who knows about cars. I'm going to need someone who knows about administrating web servers. I need someone who knows about project management, someone who knows about doing HR, someone who knows about budgeting, someone who knows about. I mean, you can suddenly what seems like quite a simple idea. I mean, I could do most of the project. When you start brainstorming about all the different aspects that are required, suddenly your team can become quite large. Um, so identify the specialist skills that you need, and you can probably turn those into an extra person for the sake of your project. For how much of the project time are they needed? Because if it's only for like a day or two, then you might like to say, well, this skill can be outsourced, and then suddenly you've got yourself another supplier. But yeah, list your specialist skills. Start with the skills, and then you can work to your team. You can build up who your team would be. Um, and then once you've got your team, draw an org chart. This is an organization chart. You might have seen them before. It's relatively simple. Basically, the head of the organization sits at the top, and then the team leaders sit underneath, and then the team members sit underneath those. Hierarchical structure, yes. Um, I could spend a long time talking about it, and we can debate it in extreme detail, but it's not. There's different management structures, and to be honest, none of that is necessary for the criteria, but you do need to produce an organization structure for your project. So whether you want that to be hierarchical, whether you want it to be flat, whether you want it to be matrix style, there's many different organizational structures. I would suggest you just do this one. You don't get any bonus points for writing. Well, actually, if you want to get a distinction or a merit, then it might be worth. You can, if you like, write about different organizational structures and compare and contrast, but you don't need to. A hierarchical org chart would be fine. So identify who your team are, and then organize them into a structure, and then draw a chart that looks similar to that for your project team, if possible. And again, if you're struggling to think of people to meet these roles, then send me an email. You don't have to wait. If you're struggling, if you can't think, if you've got brain block for some reason, send me an email and we'll work it out together. Okay. Yes. Hmm. Oh, really? I'm, I have to confess, I don't actually watch Dragon's Den. I know vaguely what it is, but patenting software is a mug's game. for a number of reasons. Mainly because you can't, I mean, trying to actually write some software that's patented is really hard. And even if you do, well, there's nothing to stop someone achieving the same goal, but using different software. Someone writing their own software that looks nothing like what you've patented, but still produces the same result. So there isn't really much point in trying to patent software. Copyrights and patents are slightly different. Copyright is just basically proving you have the idea first. But you can't copyright an idea. All you can do is copyright artwork. You can copyright bits of it. So if you have an app with, I don't know, like your virtual pet, you've got a dragon as your virtual pet, and someone else comes up with a virtual pet program with a dragon on it, so long as the dragon looks different, and so long as they clearly haven't copied and pasted your code, there's nothing to stop them creating another virtual pet app which has a dragon on it. Because you can't copyright an idea. You can just copyright artwork. You can copyright certain phrases, logos, that kind of thing. You can't copyright shapes, and you can't copyright ideas, and therefore you can't patent them either. The best thing to do is keep your source code secure, and make your app the best that there is. Because if there's two Dragon mobile virtual pet apps, one of them is really good and one of them is less good, then it doesn't matter whether it's patented or copyrighted or whatever. People are going to go for your app. And if you keep your source code secure, then no one can steal it. And that applies to everybody and is in general about copyright and coding. It's worth knowing there isn't really much point in trying to patent your software, because the other thing is you have to apply for a patent in different countries. You might well have it patented in the UK, but it might not be patented in France. So in France, someone else is selling your Dragon virtual pet code, and there's nothing you can do about it. And the other interesting thing is that copyright is automatic. You don't have to apply for copyright. You own the copyright. If you designed it and you can prove that you designed it and drew and created this piece of artwork, you own the copyright. You don't have to apply for it. You don't have to ask for it. It's yours. And then if someone looks at your ideas and somehow finds your memory stick one day and then steals it and rips off your artwork, you can say, that's my artwork, you ripped it off, I can prove that I created it at this date because I've got an older copy than yours, and then they will be forced to take it down. Copyright is automatic, patent you have to apply for. Don't rely on either of them, keep your source code safe, and make your app as good as it could be. Top tips for avoiding lawsuits. So we've come a bit of a long way from organising the team. So I move. Actually, well, let's do this. Let's do this now. See if you can, just for a couple of minutes or so. Let me pause it. So once again, read through your project brief. Have another look at your idea, and try and think of who your customers are, who your suppliers are. Obviously, you're the project manager. Who are you getting your money from? Are you going to get it from the bank, in which case the bank is your project executive? Or is it from investors? Or is it a partner? If you're funding it yourself, then maybe you can be the project manager and the project executive. So you can. Actually, if you have to get permission from both of them before you can progress, then yeah, they can both be the project executive. So try and think of who the project executive. Try and find people to fit into. Try and think of your customers and suppliers, and the project executive. And once you've done that, start thinking about what kind of specialists you might need. And they can be quite generic specialists. It might be that if you're writing an app, then yeah, you need at least 3 people who are really good with Xcode. And know loads about Objective-C, one of them who is particularly good at databases as well, or something. So think of the specialist skills that, I mean, up to this point, you might have just been thinking that you're going to do it. Just try and list it as a separate skill. So just spend a couple of minutes doing that now. So that should be enough time to have thought of customers and suppliers and specialist skills, and everyone in this room has done exactly that. You've got a good list of customers, good list of suppliers, specialist skills. You might have started drawing your organizational chart, but I don't think we need to spend any time talking about that because, well, that's what it looks like. So produce something that looks like that, where the head is at the top and then the team lead is at the next level down, and then you say who reports to the team leaders. the last bit on this is the organization of a team. What kind of, so, well, yeah, the project leadership. So this is your team. Who's going to lead your projects? What kind of skills, what kind of qualities does your project leader need to have? Throw some things out. Time management skills, yeah, definitely. Need to be have good time managers. Communication skills, yes. What else? What else does a good project leader need to have? What else does a good leader need to have? Yeah, general management skills, people management, communication skills. Need to be able to manage time, manage deadlines. Um, Leadership skills, yeah. So when you think of leaders, what are the things the leaders need to be able to do? Drive the team forward, yeah. Motivate the team. Um, what else do they need to be able to do? What else do good leaders need to be able to do? Bark orders. Actually, so I think we can cover negotiation and delegation are big parts of it. But yeah, motivation is a big thing. Communication is a big thing. The ability to delegate tasks and negotiate, especially when if there's disagreements within the team, they need to be able to keep the team rolling. This is what it says on the spec. This is what Excel reckon project leaders need. I would add to that confidence. A lot of project leaders, a lot of managers and project leaders that I know don't have much in the way of these things. What they do have is confidence, and if you've got confidence, then a lot of this stems from confidence. If you're clear on your ideas, then it's very easy to communicate them, and you have a starting position for negotiation. And if you know where you're going, then you can bring your team along with you. So a lot of this actually stems from confidence. You've done a Belbin test already. I think you spent some time with Tori talking about Belbin roles and doing the test, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that. I have put on Moodle under my section on Moodle a Belbin file, which I don't know if Tori's given to you, but it's the Belbin test, but it's also some detail about these different roles. And the idea is every team in a perfect academic land, every team should have different people that do this. A team comprising entirely of team workers doesn't get anything done, and a team consisting primarily of finishers doesn't start anything, and a team consisting primarily of shapers or plants doesn't finish anything. So a good team should have a balance of these things, but recognize these are not skills as such. These are personal qualities, personal characteristics. Behaviors. Yes, you having done this more recently than me, you may well know more. You've got Tory's input in this as well. So you can't sort of put an advert out, we need a shaper that can do this. But when you're recruiting, when you're hiring, when you're putting your team together, and when you're considering leadership of a team, then it's worth bearing some of these things in mind. It's worth drawing them out. I'm not being very specific. A good team needs to have a balance of these different personality traits, of these different behaviors. And you need to bear that in mind. The project leader needs to bear that in mind. Otherwise, the project leader is going to struggle to make the project happen. So you don't have to write lots about it, but you do need to write about, you say a project leader needs to be able to motivate, delegate, negotiate, and communicate. And you need to say, Belbin, there's a lot of research around Belbin profiles, Belbin qualities and behaviors, and these are the main ones, and a team needs to have a balance of those. You don't need to say a great deal more than that. I'm not going to say that. And there's loads and loads and loads of stuff on mindtools.com about project leadership and management and communication and Belbin. If you go to the library, I should actually have written library there as well, but if you go to any library, you'll find stacks of books on management skills and management qualities and how to manage a team. I would strongly suggest you find one and just read something, just flick through it even, but just ideally maybe read it in a bit read it in some detail and reference it. See if you can reference an actual book in your assignment submissions. That would be excellent. And remember, this is how to reference, and there's a thing on Moodle as well which will tell you how to reference. So that's it. Any questions? So this is, we've done at least 2/3 of what you need to do in assignment 2. The last thing is really just quality control and quality control and fleshing out your an OpenProj file in more detail.